Chapter 21, An Emerging World Power. This chapter will focus on the growing role the United States takes in world affairs. The first major event of this chapter is the Spanish-American War, which occurs when Cubans revolt against their parent state of Spain, and this causes the Spanish to come to Cuba and invade them in an effort to put down the rebellion. The United States remains neutral for much of this war, but is forced to take the side of Cuba after the USS Maine is destroyed in Havana Harbor. The United States blames Spain, enters the war, defeats Spain, and in the ensuing treaty gains Cuba, Guam, Puerto Rico, and the Philippines as colonies. What ensues is a large debate over whether or not the United States should, in fact, annex the Philippines primarily as a colony. And the ideology that wins out in the end is the ideology of American exceptionalism and, to a certain extent, Anglo supremacy, which dictate that the Filipinos are an inferior race and are incapable of governing themselves. So the Filipinos, which were previously ruled by the imperial power of Spain, are now ruled by the imperial power of the United States. And many Americans are unhappy with this, and the Filipinos are too, which leads to several revolts in the Philippines. The United States also begins to take a growing role in South American affairs. One example of this would be the Panama Canal, which is spearheaded by President Theodore Roosevelt, who actually ends up overthrowing an unfriendly Colombian government to successfully institute the Panama Canal Plan. He also adds the Roosevelt Corollary to the Monroe Doctrine, which gives the United States international police power over the Latin American states. The biggest example of U.S. foreign involvement during this time period would be its involvement in World War I. World War I begins as a result of the deteriorating multinational empires of the European imperial powers of this time. It begins when Serbia, which is a Slavic state, assassinates the Archduke of Austria-Hungary, Franz Ferdinand. This causes Austria-Hungary to declare war on Serbia, which allies with Russia, which is also a Slavic state. Russia allies with France and Great Britain to fight Germany, who's allied with Austria-Hungary. So you end up with the Central Powers, which are Germany and Austria-Hungary, and the Allies, which are France, Russia, and Great Britain, and eventually the United States. Even the United States is initially neutral in this conflict and intends only to make money by selling weapons to the Allies, primarily Great Britain. The Germans are expectedly unhappy with this arrangement and declare submarine warfare on the United States by declaring a naval blockade. They end up destroying the Lusitania, which is a passenger ship the United States tries to push through the naval blockade, which kills several civilians, even though the Lusitania was in fact carrying arms. This, along with several other reasons, caused the United States to declare war on Germany and take the side of the Allies, just as Russia leaves the war facing a domestic revolution. At the same time, at home, the United States tries to mobilize the economy for the war by implementing the War Industries Board. It starts creating tanks and weapons instead of commercial items. It's also created several new jobs in American factories for African Americans, which causes a great migration to the north. They also institute the Committee on Public Information, which delivers 4-minute speeches to the American people in an effort to garner support for the war. They also passed the Sedition Act, which allows the United States government to imprison individuals that express anti-war sentiment, which closely resembles the Sedition Act during the War of 1812. The United States, taking the side of the Allies, wins the war against Central Powers, and the Allied parties meet in Versailles, a palace in France, to decide the terms of the treaty. The meeting is based on the 14-point speech given by President Woodrow Wilson a year earlier, and this is all about, for Wilson, self-determination for European powers and just an advancement of democratic principles. But what ends up happening is, though Wilson does try to score a point for peace and democracy, countries like France and Great Britain, which are actually extremely angry at Germany for the devastation they've wreaked across Europe, decide to institute a treaty that, instead of attempting to recreate Europe and its economy, instead punishes Germany. This leads to lots of anti-Western sentiment in Germany, which will also lead to World War II and such. The Treaty of Versailles also creates the largely ineffective League of Nations, which is an international body that actually has little power, as the United States Congress fails to ratify the treaty that would allow the United States to join the League of Nations. So the League of Nations pretty much only has France now and is largely ineffective, and Germany is angered by the Treaty of Versailles, which will eventually lead to the French and American sentiment and all that, which will cause World War II. Thank you.